Thank you so much for joining us for our panel discussion on access to justice for veterans. This is a wonderful day to celebrate veterans and their many contributions to our country. And so it's wonderful for us to be talking today about how to get them the justice that they deserve. My name is Elizabeth Kronk Warner, and I have the privilege and honor of being Dean at the S.J. Quinney College of Law. My pronouns are she and hers. And as I like to do whenever we gather here, I like to read our University of Utah Tribal Land Acknowledgement Statement. And I acknowledge that we're all in different parts of the country, but at least where I am sitting today in the Salt Lake Valley is on the outer edge of the Goshoot territory. So this statement is particularly relevant to at least where I am physically sitting today. So we acknowledge that this land, which is named for the Ute tribe, is the traditional and ancestral homeland of the Shoshone, Paiute, Goshoot, and Ute tribes. The University of Utah recognizes and respects the enduring relationship that exists between many Indigenous peoples and their traditional homelands. We respect the sovereign relationships between tribes, states, and the federal government, and we affirm the University of Utah's commitment to a partnership with Native nations and urban Indian communities through research, education, and community outreach activities. I also, as we start today, want to acknowledge and thank the Alexander Blewett Law School at the University of Montana and the College of Law at the University of Missouri for co-sponsoring this event with us today. We're really excited that we can come together as three universities to present this panel for you. So today is Veterans Day, and as we were talking about how we wanted to acknowledge and celebrate this day and celebrate the many contributions that veterans have made to our society, there were several topics that we considered in terms of taking on for purposes of this panel discussion. And ultimately, we landed on this issue of access to justice because many of our veterans, as they return home, are not having either the access that they deserve or the ease of access that they deserve. You'll hear from several of our panelists today who will talk about how complicated the process and confusing the process can be. So I think that we'll see that, unfortunately, that is a reality for our country. So we thought that this was a really important conversation to have, especially on Veterans Day, and that is how to get our veterans the access to justice that they deserve. So our moderator for today's conversation is my colleague, and I'm very privileged and honored to have him as my colleague, Jim Holbrook, who was on faculty, is now emeritus faculty at the University of Utah, and is still with us, though, as a member of our career development office, which speaks to his passion for helping to advise students, the fact that he's willing to stay on in this role with career development. And it's really an honor to have Jim moderate this panel because he is a decorated veteran of the Vietnam War, where he won both the Bronze Star and the Army Commendation Medal for Valor. Since becoming a lawyer, he is one of the most highly regarded attorneys in our state. He, for example, put together many high-profile projects such as the Trolley Square deal in downtown Salt Lake City. If you've had a chance to visit Salt Lake City, you know that this is a really important part of the downtown area, and Jim was instrumental in that development. He's also an ADR expert, having written extensively in the areas of mediation, negotiation, and ADR, as well as practicing in those areas. He serves on the Wagner Foundation, as well as providing numerous other services to the community. And I'm incredibly excited that he's agreed to be our moderator today. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jim Holbrook. Jim?
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to go first after I introduce our other panelists and talk about my experience as a combat veteran and coming back from war, because I think there are some universal features of my experience that current veterans share. And then our first panelist is Professor Brent Filbert at the University of Missouri College of Law in Columbia, Missouri. He's a supervising attorney and clinical director of Mizzou's Veterans Clinic. He was a military lawyer for 30 years, 15 years on active duty and 15 years in the reserves. He's also practiced law in private practice. He hit the clinic in Columbia, does several things. They work directly with veterans. They also help lawyers who are not at the law school learn veterans law so that other lawyers are able to work with veterans. And they present an annual symposium on veterans law, some aspect of veterans law, for the general public. I've asked each of the panelists if they would, in their own presentations, include information about how they got interested in their expertise, how and why, in addition to what it is that they're doing. Our second panelist is Professor Hilary Wandler at the University of Montana School of Law. And it has an in-house veterans advocacy clinic in Missoula. She teaches courses in legal analysis and writing and veterans disability law. She began representing veterans on VA claims and appeals in 2006 after her father faced difficulty dealing with the VA. The clinic provides legal representation to Montana veterans involving VA claims for service-connected disability benefits, VA claims for increased disability rating, applications for discharge, upgrade, and consultation with practitioners on various legal issues for veterans, including family law. Our third panelist is Judge Royal Hansen, who is a third district court state judge in Salt Lake City. He founded the third district court's Veterans Court, which has been very successful. I had the honor of being a graduation speaker at one of the graduation ceremonies. And Judge Hansen is going to talk about the court and how it works with veterans who have gotten into criminal problems. So Professor Filbert is going to talk about helping veterans with VA disability claims. Professor Wandler is going to talk about increasing disability ratings and discharge upgrades. And then Judge Hansen will talk about how veterans need help getting access to justice in the criminal process. So the reason why I'm the moderator is in 1969, I served in combat in Vietnam in an artillery unit. And I was, with others, responsible for computing the fire direction information that were sent to 155 millimeter howitzers to fire 100-pound projectiles at the enemy. And I was very good at my job. Our unit was very good. And in the time that I was with that battery, we helped kill dozens of enemy soldiers. When I got home, I found that I had trouble going to sleep. I had nightmares, recurring nightmares. I was startled by loud noises. I drank too much. I had relationship issues. And much later, I realized that these were symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, which had not been named at the time that I got back from Vietnam. Fortunately, my PTSD symptoms did not interfere with my professional abilities. And so I went to law school and became a lawyer, practiced law for 28 years downtown, and then joined the faculty. And I was faculty member full-time for 17 years. So when veterans come back today, a number of them, not all, but a number of them have experiences like I do. And because today's Army or military service is an all volunteer service, some of our veterans have been deployed 5, 6, 7 times in combat. And it's hard for me to imagine how those multiple deployments affect a veteran. So I think today's society is much more veteran friendly than it was 50 years ago. But getting benefits through the VA is a complex process. And some veterans really do need expert legal services. And they're fortunate in Missouri and Montana to have veterans legal clinics which can provide those expert legal services. So, Professor Phil, will you tell us what it is that you do in Columbia, Missouri?
Sure, Jim. Thank you for having me as part of this panel. It's I really appreciate it. And on this day, it really is an important topic to talk about veterans, in our country today and what they face. So my background as a military lawyer really led me to end up being at the Veterans Clinic here at Mizzou Law School to help veterans. When I was in the military, in the Navy, most of my time was spent as a defense counsel. I also spent time as a military appellate judge as well. And my experience during that time was I was representing sailors and Marines, some who were accused of various serious crimes, but others, many others who were not. And when I would represent them and work with them and get to know them, it always struck me as many of them had the experience of one day they were considered to be a good Marine, a good sailor, a person who was doing all the right things in their job in the military and in life. And in the next day in the military, they're often viewed as being, for lack of a better term, considered dirtbags. They went from being in to being out in a very quick manner. And that was very hard for them to deal with that. And they were, many of them were very, very good people who either did something wrong or got involved in something that was really relatively minor in the view of in the grand scheme of things. But they had that experience. And so I always felt very committed to trying to help them to get the best possible situation they could. And I loved representing sailors and Marines. I really did. So when I got done with all that and was offered the opportunity to work at the Veterans Clinic here at the Mizzou Law School, it struck me that the veterans that we assist in many ways have that same feeling in the sense that they served and they viewed themselves one way in terms of their service and what they had done. And then when they got involved in the process of filing a disability claim for some injury or condition that they believed they was caused by their active duty service or occurred while they were in service, and to be told, no, you're wrong. What you did isn't deserving of what you think it is. You could see that it affected them in a lot of the same ways. And so it made me very quickly be committed to helping veterans. And we represent veterans in two areas primarily, that is disability compensation cases with the VA and discharge upgrades. So particularly, I'll focus on the disability compensation cases, although we do a lot of discharge upgrades as well. So in a case went up to the Supreme Court a few years ago, and in that case, the Supreme Court found that in almost 80% of initial disability compensation claims, that there's an error made by the VA in adjudicating those cases. And so once you have initial denial of a disability claim, you go into the appellate process. And it's a very long, complex process. The average claim takes about 7 years to be finally resolved once you get past that initial claim. 14% of veterans will die while their claim is pending. And so it can be very, very frustrating and very difficult for veterans to really deal with that. Not only are they not getting the disability compensation that they deserve under the contract really that America made with them when they went into service, they have to deal with getting letters from the VA. And then this is not, and I'm not here to just bash the VA. That's not, I don't think that's helpful. I mean, I get my health care from the VA Medical Center here in Columbia, and I think they do a great job. But on the disability compensation side, it can be really, really disheartening for veterans. And I've seen many who, really are at their wits' end. And so when we take their cases, we are taking primarily the cases, those appeals. And once you get a lawyer involved, it can make all the difference in the world. So the Veterans Clinic here was founded in 2014 by a professor, Angela Drake, whose father was a paratrooper in Vietnam, was killed in combat. She went to law school on the GI Bill, and I always felt a very much a debt for that, and wanted to do something about it. So she started the clinic in 2014 out of whole cloth, based upon a couple of students coming to her who are veterans and saying, "Hey, we should start this clinic to help veterans with disability claims." It started in 2014. It's now grown to be one of the premier veterans clinics at a law school in the country. I mean, not to brag about us, but we really are, at the cutting edge of a lot of things. We have about 16 students each semester who are in the clinic, so they get the experience of being part of representing a veteran, learning about what veterans do, their service, what that means, but also, real life clients who have real problems that they're trying to help with. So when I get off this call, the minute I get after this call, one of my students and I are going to be doing a phone conference interviewing a witness to get a statement in support of a disability compensation case for a veteran who served in Vietnam and who has suffered from PTSD for many, many years because of his experiences there. So they get this great experience of representing veterans and learning what lawyers really do and how much they can help veterans. So as far as access goes for veterans, I would say that one, having the ability to have a lawyer represent you during the process, it really can make all the difference in the world. And if they try and do it on their own, in many ways, it's a losing proposition. So having clinics like ours gives veterans access to get the disability compensation that they're entitled to, in a way also that is, I think, more gratifying for them because they have somebody who's fighting for them, and they're not just doing it on their own and getting no letters from the VA and where it says you're not entitled, this is not service connected, or whatever it says. And then the final thing I'll say about access to veterans from our perspective is, Missouri, or Missouri as we say here, has a big rural part of our population. And one of the things we recognized at the Veterans Clinic was that there was a huge population in our state of rural veterans who just don't have access to the same things that veterans have in more urban areas. So for example, there are 73 counties in our state, rural counties, that did not have a veteran service officer from the Missouri Veterans Commission. So really no veteran service officer, or maybe one that was not very close in those communities. So we started a program, we call it Tigers for Troops, Missouri Tigers, where we go out throughout the state and meet with veterans in those rural areas and provide them assistance in disability compensation cases, discharge upgrades. We also bring a VA healthcare rep to sign them up for healthcare if they don't have it. And we started doing that, going around physically around the state, but then began realizing that we could do part of that via technology, and then COVID hit. And so we have really transitioned to doing now, it's all done like this via Zoom, where we have consultations with veterans all the time in these rural areas. And we actually, in a 2-year period, have provided assistance in all 73 of those counties. So that program is coming.
I want to say thank you to Dean Kronk for inviting me to participate in this panel and acknowledge my fellow panelists who served our country and are using their experiences to help others who served. You inspire me, and I thank you for everything you're doing. I became involved in advocating for veterans, as Jim mentioned, because of my father, who was career military. And like many others, I assumed that people like my father who served our country in the US military would actually have better access to medical care, to legal services, to benefits that assist the transition into civilian life and then account for the burdens military service can lay on an individual. As I became familiar with my father's struggles to obtain appropriate benefits and services, though, I learned that access to these important support structures are negatively impacted by many things. Professor Filbert already covered some of these, and I'm just going to be echoing them as well. These include geographic distance from services and geographic isolation, as Professor Filbert pointed out, so rurality. They also include complex systems that make it difficult, if not impossible, for those untrained in administrative processes and law to represent themselves. And when you couple that with a lack of legal services, you have a real access issue. It also includes cultural barriers to seeking help, and that's a special concern in the military and veterans communities. I now direct the Veterans Advocacy Clinic at the University of Montana, Alexander Blewett III School of Law. We regularly encounter veterans who have struggled to access benefits and services that would allow them to thrive in civilian society. And Jim asked me to use an example from a veteran that our clinic has served. I've changed the name and some of the details just to protect the veteran's identity. But this veteran, who I will call Bill, served in the Marine Corps in some of the most significant combat engagements in Iraq. He came from a family of veterans. He wanted to be a part of that legacy of service. We hear that a lot from our clients. He thrived in his deployment, and by all accounts, both official and unofficial, he showed exceptional bravery in combat and likely saved his commanding officer's life. But even before he was home from his deployment, he started to struggle with things like sleep and vivid nightmares and survivor's guilt from the significant losses his unit suffered in Iraq. He saw some of his fellow service members drinking and what he said, misbehaving is what he called it, in the city. And he said, I just didn't want to follow in their footsteps. And he felt desperation because his anxiety and panic were just ramping up to unmanageable levels. And so he desperately turned to marijuana to bring that down to a tolerable level. He was very careful to only use that on his days off and only use it alone. And he did not seek out mental health help. We hear this a lot as well because of the culture. In his unit, the rumblings were it was only those who couldn't cut it who would go to mental health. And he didn't want to be one of those people. He eventually failed a routine urinalysis. Command saw the unit unraveling and wanted to make an example, and so they put him through a special court-martial process. They did not ask him about mental health. They did not offer him mental health services other than a quick box checking exercise on the way back from the deployment. During the court-martial trial, the prosecutor referred to Bill as nothing more than a trigger puller, and that phrase has replayed in Bill's mind countless times since. His court-martial decision stated that he was an administrative burden and of no further value to the Marine Corps. And these phrases became a source of great shame as he was discharged with a less than fully honorable characterization of service. Now, what I wanted to cover today specifically is that veterans like Bill are ineligible for many VA benefits and services that assist with that transition from military to civilian life, like healthcare, pension, compensation for service-caused conditions that prevent work, housing, and other ancillary benefits. For veterans with so-called bad paper, the DD-214, which is that discharge paper given to every service member, often includes phrases like court-martial or misconduct or drug abuse. And because civilian employment applications ask about military service and often ask for a copy of the DD-214, these veterans also struggle to obtain civilian employment. Scholars have actually opined that receiving a less than fully honorable discharge acts like a criminal record with the same types of barriers to employment and social stigmas. Another thing I wanted to note today is that veterans do not have the same access to expungement processes that civilians with criminal records do. And one example I think is particularly relevant to the case study that I've used today. Given the national shift away from criminalizing marijuana offenses, some states are rapidly moving forward with what they're calling record relief programs, making applications to sentencing courts to vacate previous convictions nearly automatic. This would certainly have applied to Bill, who was not even caught possessing the marijuana, but rather just failing a urinalysis. In other words, he had personal use with no evidence of intent to distribute or significant possession. But because Bill's personal use happened while he was in the military, he cannot take advantage of the same types of expungement processes. And his offense will just continue in his record and continue having those detrimental impacts on his life. Veterans do have access to a process to request relief from less than fully honorable discharges, and that's something that both the Mizzou Clinic and the Montana Clinic help veterans with. This is in front of the Department of Defense review boards, which are created for every branch of service. And they receive applications from veterans asking for upgraded characterizations of service, as well as other corrections and changes to the DD-214, including things like that narrative reason for separation that can be so damaging. And while some exceptional help is offered by veterans organizations that publish self-help guides like Swords to Plowshares, these processes are not simple, and they can actually be somewhat misleading in our opinion. For example, the Department of Defense form used to apply to a discharge review board for an upgraded discharge, the DD Form 293, offers one small, I think it's an inch and a half, Professor Filbert might be able to correct me if that's wrong, but box in which it appears to a person filling out the form, you are supposed to fit your entire argument in support of an upgrade. And while the surrounding questions allude to potential other arguments like PTSD or mental health conditions or medical documentation and evidence of post-service good conduct, the form does not immediately make clear to a veteran that you can present a persuasive argument along with that evidence. Some veterans will research the process. They'll find the good self-help guides, and they will even get on the VA's system, which walks them through that process. But those who do not will be usually summarily denied. The statistics are really fairly dismal for a person who simply fills out the form and does not offer persuasive argument and evidence in support. Access to technology is necessary for that kind of research. And as Professor Filbert noted, remote rural veterans are probably less likely to be connected to both the technology and the personnel who would be able to help with that. This is where we think lawyers who take an interest in veterans with less than fully honorable discharges can make the most significant difference. Studying the process and assisting the veteran with a well-supported application in support of an upgrade can truly change that veteran's life and the trajectory of that veteran's life and the veteran's family's lives as well. A related process I wanted to mention today is that veterans may use the VA's character of discharge determination. And this process involves applying for a VA benefit or service and asking the VA to treat the veteran's service as honorable for purposes of VA benefits and services. And the VA's rules actually require it to evaluate that application. A positive character of discharge determination does not change the DD-214, so it's not a full upgraded discharge, but it can open doors to critical supportive services and income that can help a veteran survive while actually pursuing a full upgraded discharge. And we've encountered several veterans who truly need to walk down that path toward the VA first and get that door opened in order to have the support they need to pursue the full upgrade. And I also wanted to note you can pursue both of those things at the same time. Again, though, I think the big takeaway for me is that most of the veterans we encounter, and our clinic admittedly focuses on serving low-income veterans and veterans with significant barriers to access these systems. Most of them need someone to help them through these processes. My students and I note that these veterans sometimes find the forms confusing, oftentimes find the systems complex, and rarely recognize when the systems are not working as they were designed to work, and people within the systems are telling them things that are not appropriate and do not fit with the law as it was designed. So the VAC has been trying to spread the message that lawyers can provide life-altering and service-affirming advocacy to veterans, including those who have less than fully honorable discharges. Those less than fully honorable discharges may have been mitigated by significant mental health conditions that were caused by honorable service. So that's the message I want to leave you with today. I truly appreciate the opportunity to continue spreading the message through this forum. These veterans tend to be overrepresented also in the criminal justice system. So I'm happy to be able to turn it back to Jim, who will then send it to Judge Hansen to talk about his work in the Veterans Treatment Court, which is another really important service to the veterans community.
Thank you, Hillary. Judge Hansen, will you tell us about your justice court, your Veterans Court in the 3rd District Court for the state of Utah?
Thank you for the opportunity of being a part of this panel here today and in connection with Veterans Day. And I want all of our veterans to know how much we appreciate their service and how much it means to us as citizens of the United States and the difference that they make in our lives. I have great admiration and appreciation for those that have served in the armed forces. I note our panelists, several of them have had that privilege. I also want to express appreciation to Dean Kronk Warner for her invitation to appear here today and to focus on these issues that are closely related to all of our veterans. I'm going to talk today about veterans who've lost their way and how they can receive a second chance to be successful. And the program that I have the good fortune of dealing with is a Veterans Treatment Court. And our court was formed in 2015, and noting that in Buffalo, New York in 2009, we had the first Veterans Court. And they have spread throughout the country, and most jurisdictions now will have a Veterans Treatment Court. We're fortunate to have a Veterans Treatment Court in both the 3rd District, which is Salt Lake County, and the 4th District, which is Utah County. And we also have Judge Warner, who has organized a Veterans Treatment Court in our Federal District Court and in our Salt Lake City Justice Court, Judge Baxter. And they've made an enormous difference in these veterans' lives and what's happened. A Veterans Court is very similar to a drug court, and I think most of us are familiar with what happens in a drug court and the success that they've had in drug courts. They're organized under the umbrella of the National Association for the Drug Court Professionals. They include mental health courts, they include veterans courts and drug courts, all part of that umbrella and family. You know, one of the significant differences with veterans treatment courts is that our veterans have better resources by virtue of the Veterans Administration than most state and local entities are prepared to provide. We have VJOs from the VA that provide significant service to all of our veterans, and particularly those that are homeless or have legal problems. Everyone in our court has a felony that they have been charged with. And so we start with that felony, and oftentimes the veteran is allowed to enter a plea to oftentimes a plea in abeyance and allow them to work through the process. If they're successful at Veterans Treatment Court, that felony can be dismissed at the end of the term. And we've really attempted to expand our reach. When I first started in this drug court and veterans court process, it was mostly just theft and property and drug cases. Anything that had more of a more serious nature, we didn't want to address that. Times have changed. I find that significant persons crimes, domestic violence, felony DUIs are all crimes for which we are addressing the Veterans Treatment Court at the present time. And, you know, the other significant difference that is what I think is really important in our Veterans Court is that we not only have a significant treatment resource, but we have volunteer veterans. So veterans come to our court, are there every week, assist our veterans as mentors. And they are lined up one-to-one with each of our veterans here, and they have services that they render. And I appreciate what those mentors do for our veterans and the significant service that they render. In addition to having felonies, our veterans are also high risk, high need on an assessment scale. They've all served in the armed forces. And let me tell you how we obtain referrals. We have an outstanding legal defender's office here in Salt Lake County, and everyone that is represented by a legal defender is also advised with regard to opportunities for Veterans Treatment Court as an alternative way of dealing with the crimes that they've been charged with. And we are trying to expand that. We attempt to advise our Bar Association, and particularly the Criminal Defense Bar Association, that these services are available and that it's a great option and alternative. And it's also one where we have an opportunity to find solutions for our veterans that don't include incarceration. And that's why it's entitled a Veterans Treatment Court. We appreciate the significant contribution that Professor Holbrook's rendered for our court. He served as a graduation speaker. This past week, we had a graduation where we had 8 additional graduates whose charges were dismissed, who have a second chance to be successful and be part of the community. And we appreciate the service that they render. What our court's trying to do at the present time in connection with our legislature is expand the services of Veterans Treatment Court. We're looking at jurisdictions in the south of the state of Utah, out of St. George and Washington County, and in the north out of Weber County and Ogden, where we can organize additional Veterans Treatment Court. You know, we have veterans that are suffering from PTSD, as Professor Holbrook alluded to here, traumatic brain injuries, substance abuse issues that are significant, mental health issues. And what we find in our Veterans Court is we can treat all of these ailments that our veterans are suffering from, and the services that we can render with regard to that. You know what, our veterans have significant opportunities to turn things around, to get their lives back, reuniting with family and friends, re-earning honor that they had during their service in the United States military, become contributing members to the community, obtaining housing. One of the remarkable things our veterans are doing is they're purchasing their own home. So of our 8 graduates, we had one that had purchased his own home and was making progress there. We have 3 graduates that are enrolled in higher education and working on bachelor's degrees in at various universities throughout the state. We have employment opportunities that they have not enjoyed previously that have made a significant difference. And the motto of our court that you'll see on the challenge coin that we have and deliver to each of our veterans and ask them to carry that with them is that no veterans left behind, and that we make it possible, if they're willing to work at this process, that they can be successful and move forward. You know, Veterans Court is really a significant alternative to incarceration, and we find that Veterans Court is, number one, 70% less expensive than if we incarcerate these individuals. For every $1 that we spend on veterans treatment courts, we receive $27 of benefit. And we find that recidivism rates are reduced well below 50% of what they were prior to going into this. So I want you to know what an advocate I am for our veterans, for veterans treatment courts, and the services that they can render. And I appreciate Professor Holbrook, your support of this, and the chance to share that with our community here today.
Thank you, Judge Hansen. Okay, I'm now going to turn this back to Dean Kronk Warner, and she is going to give us an opportunity to ask questions and provide answers. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jim. So you should at the bottom of your screen have a box that says Q&A. So feel free to type any questions that you have for our panelists into the Q&A box, and we will try to make our way through them. So the first question comes from Scott. Scott asks, what are the tips for building trust with veterans who have lost faith in the system? And I think this is probably a question that all of our panelists can answer based on their experience with veterans.
Well, I'll jump in on that. I think that the one tip that I would say, I mean, it's sort of like what good lawyers do, which is you really have good communication with your client in terms of what the process is like, what's going to happen, and then keep them informed every step throughout the process. And that's one thing for our students that we really emphasize is communication with your clients. That is the key part to it. You always have to manage expectations, but if you tell them, what's going to happen, what you're going to do for them, and then keep up the communications, that really starts mending the trust factor, and that you're actually on their side. You're not on the side of, what they view as the other side.
I would agree, Dean, with regard to that. I find that our veterans, as we see them, have lost faith and trust in the process that we have. We encourage them and try to be as transparent as possible. We encourage them to come in and see the process, to fully vet what's going to happen in this process. And we provide an orientation that they know exactly what the expectations are. We also tell them that this is not the easy way. They want an easier way, that they can find a way to plead to some charge and do so. But if they really want a chance to be successful and regain their lives, that this is an opportunity in Veterans Court.
So next we have a question from Alexine, who says, do you see a gender gap in access to justice for veterans? Specifically, are there differences between men and women in tendency and or ability to access resources? Professor Wandler?
Yeah, I think there are some unique differences that we've seen when we are helping a woman who served in the military. Some of the time what we're dealing with is military sexual trauma and its aftermath. And that's a particular type of trauma that can impact that person's, first of all, characterization of service. And so some of the things that can happen are that person can start to have some behavioral unraveling after the trauma that then is interpreted by command as simple misbehavior, which then leads to a less than fully honorable discharge. And so there are opportunities to advocate for that woman to get an upgraded discharge, but then it can cause lasting and chronic PTSD that then you might be applying to the VA for benefits and services to assist with that. There are special programs also for women, both with respect to MST or military sexual trauma and to some of the health needs that are particular to women. And so there are some unique differences that we've encountered and real opportunities to help female veterans.
Great. So this next question also comes from Alexine, and it's for Professor Holbrook. Professor Holbrook, what role, if any, do you see ADR playing in mitigating the access to justice challenge for veterans? Is there an opportunity for mediation to be used?
Well, let me actually pitch this back to our two professors, because I don't know, I personally don't know and have not seen ADR used to assist veterans, either with disability claims or with upgrades. Brent and Hillary, can you help us?
Sure, so right now, ADR is not really part of the process for disability claims or for discharge upgrades. Just an interesting side note, we have a symposium every year here at Mizzou Law on veterans law, and we had the former chief judge of the Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims give the keynote. He's now a senior judge on the court, and he really advocated for ADR being part of the process to get resolution of disability claims early on through a mediation process instead of being in this very much a sort of rigid system of appeals and denials. That's where it stands as far as ADR. I don't know if Hillary had any other comments about that.
The one place that we have actually thought that ADR could be particularly helpful in the VA system is with respect to red flags in the medical and benefit system. A red flag can attach to a veteran due to an interaction with staff at VA. And in our experience, those are often due to real misunderstandings and sometimes even cultural differences. And we feel that alternative dispute resolution could be a real game changer in that process. We have not yet applied it, and we haven't figured out quite how to do that, but we're definitely thinking about it.
Great. So our next question comes from an anonymous attendee who says, it sounds like there's a lot of work being done for veterans who are in the community. Are any of you doing work with currently incarcerated veterans? It is an interesting cycle to note that perhaps a veteran could end up in the system as a result of something that was experienced has impacted their behavior because of their time in the military.
We deal with incarcerated individuals on a daily basis. So oftentimes that's where we'll locate our veterans that we're providing services for in our Veterans Treatment Court. They'll have been charged with a crime, they'll have been arrested, they'll be booked and in jail, and oftentimes before they enter into our court, they're still in custody at this point in time. The other thing about Veterans Treatment Courts is that they are a treatment court, and that punishment or jail is not the first option or alternative that we're looking at. That there are rewards and ways to modify behavior outside of going to jail. And we've made great strides in doing that. But one of the valuable things is that if in fact incarceration is going to assist in the treatment process, that we have that as an additional tool that the court can use.
Wonderful. Our next question comes from John. What percentage of veterans who did not see active combat are seen in clinics and veterans courts?
Let me just speak with regard to veterans courts. You don't need to have combat. All you need to be is a veteran out of one of the armed forces. And whatever your background is, and whatever you did is not dependent upon whether or not you're entitled to be in veterans court and receive the benefits that are available.
Great.
I would say with regard to the clinics, I mean, a significant percentage of our clients did not see active combat. I mean, a large number did, but it's not whether or not you were in combat or not doesn't impact whether or not you're entitled to disability compensation for injuries or conditions that occurred in service, or a discharge upgrade. There's really, it's not a requirement for either side of it.
Wonderful.
And sorry, I was just going to chime in and say for our clinic, currently our caseload is the vast majority have seen active combat, whether the veteran was male or female. But again, I echo the comments that that's not a prerequisite. And we have also helped veterans who had significant injuries, including traumatic brain injuries from non-combat service.
So I'm going to combine a couple of questions here because I think this is going to have to be the last question as we're running out of time. So we had 3 questions that I think are asking for more technical help. So the first is, do you have to be accredited to help a veteran with either VA or DRBs? The second is, are the panelists willing to share their contact information or have people follow up for help? And the third is, are there any written materials that could be referenced in relation to Veterans Court or to one of the clinics that we've been talking about? So do you have to be accredited? Can people follow up with the panelists to get additional help? And are there any written materials for the Veterans Court or one of the clinics that we've discussed?
So quick answer on the accreditation. To do a discharge upgrade, you do not need to be accredited as an attorney with the VA. To represent veterans in the VA disability system, you do have to be accredited by the VA. It's not a difficult process, but you do get one freebie. You can represent a veteran during disability in a disability compensation case one time without being accredited. But it's not a difficult process for attorneys to go through. I'll let the others address the other topics because I feel like I've been talking too much.
I can certainly provide my email address in the chat for you, and I'm more than happy to talk to you. I saw a question from someone within the VA system. I'd love to hear what you're doing with homeless veterans and how you're going to set up claims clinics. And I'd be more than happy to talk to anyone who has follow-up questions as well.
Good. Let me suggest, if someone is interested in additional information on organizing a veterans court. Number one, I'd be glad to assist or provide information. And let me refer you to the NADCP. So if you simply put that in, the NADCP is the drug court professionals, and one of the branches is veterans court. Out of that, they can provide you with significant information and standards for organizing and operating a court. And I would be pleased to assist anyone that is interested in organizing one and tell them of our experiences and the ways that they may be successful in doing so.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And Professor Wandler has put her email address in the chat. So it's hillary.wandler@umontana.edu. So I'll share one last comment and then we are out of time. It comes from Lori Nelson, who says, I'm the daughter of a veteran and married to one. And I just wanted to say thank you for all of the work you are doing for veterans across the country. And I think she speaks for all of us when she says thank you. This was an incredibly helpful panel. I know I learned a lot. It's a wonderful way to acknowledge and thank our veterans by providing them adequate access to justice, and a great topic for us to discuss on Veterans Day. So a big thank you to our panelists. This will also be available on YouTube too. So for those of you who reached out and asked for additional follow-up information, we will post it there as well. So thank you so much, and we hope you all have a wonderful Veterans Day. Thanks.